areas of what's going on. I can proceed because your system keeps freezing on me. As you are aware, honorable members, protocols exist to define specific areas of cooperation under the SADC Treaty. The SADC Treaty provides the basic framework for collaboration and leaves the areas of cooperation open to member states to decide upon. And this is where you come into the picture, because you need to catalyze that process, or at least in cooperation with the executive, depending on your system, to see how that works. When member states agree on certain areas of cooperation, such as health, such as investment, legal affairs, trade, or any other, then there's another level of cooperation which should take place on the specific identified theme. Since the law always follows policy, a protocol is drawn up for member states to cooperate on the specific theme. The policy emanates from the SADC Council and ultimately summit, thus giving the green light for the protocol to be drafted to reflect the policy at domestic level or at regional level. So this is just simply put so that we understand the process. But the lawyers tomorrow, this is in my simple language. The councils tomorrow, Ms. Toko, Zambia, and Angola, will explain the whole issues of ratification, accession, and all those things, so that you can appreciate in legal terms what it means. But for the purpose of our work, we see this as part of the cooperation. The SADC Parliamentary Forum exists to support the implementation capacity of SADC. And therefore, by being a community, we agree to cooperate and set standards on certain areas, which are formulated in the various instruments, and the names are given, which the lawyers will speak to tomorrow. This is sabotage. There were certain issues that arose after the policy of summit that may hamper ratification. And this was contained in the report, we don't know, but maybe we'll glean much more appreciation when the lawyers speak to us tomorrow. And the question that Honorable Shelley was asking earlier, can a country agree to disagree, so to speak? Or can we actually believe that once a signature is there, or a country has deposited the instrument, can they then decide to sit back and not do anything about it? And what is the role of Parliament in this regard? And it differs from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But what has been noted is that there's lack of visibility on the policy. Because decisions are taken by consensus, the real uptake in enthusiasm of member states may not be seen or felt during summit, just like it happens at the SADC Parliamentary Forum. We sit there, we resolve, those who say aye, those who say no, nobody says anything. We leave the room believing that we've agreed and there's consensus on a particular issue. And therefore, it may be the case that member states, when approving the policy, do not know exactly where they are heading, and they await for the finalized version of the protocol to decide on whether they will cooperate or not. So these are some of the analysis we're infusing into, but the lawyers will tell us differently. But that is an assumption, because why is it that after consensus and agreement, then we have reasons to continue to study that which we've agreed to, or that we are still consulting or doing other things? So it's often at the level of the signature and ratification of the protocol that member states express reservations to issues such as the protocol does not have the requisite number of signatures to enter into force. There are all these issues, but one looks from the outside and said, but if there's general agreement, why is there no movement in this particular issue? And I think this is a matter for you as members of Parliament to interrogate. There's also an observation that arises that made us settle for this particular discussion. There's a misalignment of policy. And we don't know, but another factor is that by drafting the protocol, the details of the protocol exceed the agreed policy of summit. Therefore, issues of misalignment between policy and the law prevent the protocol from being ratified. When we agree Our own domestic realities also play. But because we are diplomatic organizations, or we agree on general thresholds, which lawyers will explain what the domestication process entails, that there should be no contradiction with domestic law, among others, we may have to look into this and find out where's the misalignment. We know regional law cannot be imposed. However, this is a matter for us to look at. So I'm just triggering analysis so that we don't just give you data and facts and end up complaining, why are they not signing, what is going on? It causes for us to really critically look into what are the issues. And that is why we've invited legal counsels from 3 countries, Angola, Zambia, and Eswatini, to share with us their processes so that we may benchmark and reflect on our own realities at country level. There's also what we may believe is unwillingness to take up ownership. And this, I believe, some people call it political will. I think as honorable members, you may also share and assist us in that regard, because there are issues of ownership, and that one we need to look at. If arrangements to enter into a protocol started under a previous government, a new government may not agree to sign or ratify, since it would mean contributing to the legacy of the previous regime. Maybe not. But these are issues that we see where we have to go back to the drawing board. After you thought there was agreement, a new government then begins to say, no, let us go and study this all over again. And as you are well aware, we spoke about 12 elections happening between 2023 and 2024. So what does that mean? And how can we avert some of these issues of ownership, if indeed they are the cause? We also have the leftist versus the rightist debate in parliaments. We hear, under international law, it is also common to find that the rightist governments are less inclined to enter into regional cooperation than the leftist governments, and are more conservative and protectionist of their national borders. For example, the Republican Party in the US, Tory-led majority in the UK, which led to the Brexit. How this interplays in SADC is yet to be ascertained. And I often talk about the fact that parliamentary staff need to do research. We're discussing last night with the legal drafters and saying, we are sitting on so much experience. The citizens of SADC are sitting out there and wonder what is happening inside. Members of parliament leave parliament sometimes forever without having shared the experience or teaching the citizens what politics is all about and what the expectations are. Governments also don't share their difficulties in terms of why domestication becomes a crisis or a problem, where you find in the case of the Brexit, citizens of X country had to retire from their work and leave because they were no longer part and bound by what has happened. So that's when we started hearing debates of, but why did they do this? The climate change debate was another, where the US took their own decision and citizens were saying, but why when climate change is an issue? But often citizens don't realize that when we vote for honorable members, we're also transferring our rights to them in order to decide on our behalf. And these are issues that I think sometimes need to be discussed and understood by our citizens that we represent. There's also competing international interest. Sometimes the process of protocol drafting and ratification takes so long that member states, meanwhile, even if they subscribe to other beneficial bilateral and multilateral treaties, which are then conflictual to the protocol, that does not become very clear. And we see currently with the Russia-Ukraine war, where the geopolitics are at play. And therefore, we find ourselves not knowing which policy direction we should be subscribing to. We find that the member states sometimes will then leave the protocol ratification pending due to the competing international interest. Some of you have been following in the region. We've also seen countries trying to amend certain treaties in order to allow certain things to happen, which they decide upon as a government. Ronald, where is he? This thing is not pressing. Why is it only you who can press it?
Next question.
Okay. So the lessons that we have learned at the SADC PF, and I must say that this analysis is not that of you members. It's an analysis from the practical work. Hmm?
It says post.
I was just making a disclaimer there, honorable members, that this is part of what our work informs us. And this is yet to actually be confirmed as to why is it that we're having some of these delays. It's anecdotal in terms of what we may perceive as technocrats, but it is not what the SADC Parliamentary Forum has concluded on. We also have lessons that we learn from these processes. We have learned that international law moves quickly because international law is subject to rapid changes. International law consisting of treaties, protocols, and conventions equally move fast. We believe that protocols must thus be processed in optimum time, or they may become redundant. There are those who have asked, why don't protocols have a timeline? I believe that in the discussions tomorrow with the legal counsels from our countries, they'll tell us whether this is possible or not, or it follows the principle of diplomacy and consensus that you cannot impose. You believe that you are cooperating at the end of the day. We also note that policy visibility is crucial. Policy must be as detailed as possible so that countries do not face unexpected surprises when protocol is drafted, such that they express reservations or simply withdraw from the process earlier on. Otherwise, because of the nature of how we make decisions at this level, you find that we all agree, but it is not surprising that you could sit on one protocol for over 10 years or more. Yet it's a priority of cooperation that you have identified that must be looked at. When we were in Tanzania, I don't know if you recall, we're talking about the pool procurement. And Tanzania was saying, we are encouraging you to please, let's come together. It's a decision that we've made, would save money. And we also know at the same time that there are stockouts in most of our countries. We are struggling to have medicines in our hospitals, among others. There's also the perpetual existence of states must prevail. In international relations, we know that although we have a principle of pacta sunt servanda, is that how you say it? How do you, whatever that is, the issue of good faith. International relations, we believe, should be firmly grounded on the permanent and perpetual existence of member states so that a change in government does not affect previous negotiations. But I don't know if that is the practice. So, honorable members, that is why we brought this, and I'm trying to break it down into practical terms for us to really engage and come up with recommendations. Otherwise, we get stuck in the legalese, in the instruments, and then we don't take responsibility that we are part of the government. And therefore that wherever we sit, we must look at what is it that we can unblock. I'll move on to the next slide, Chair, unless there are any questions that we need to address. But just for clarity, and because part of this committee is that we learn by doing, it is a rare committee that even when at the time of conception, I was told that there's nothing like that that exists in Parliament, so SG is not going to work. And I said, but it has to work, because how then application becomes a factor for accountability? Where does members of Parliament make inroads into processes like this? And this is part of the effort, and I appreciate that it may not be familiar. We are not duplicating efforts in terms of commissions at the AU or the UN, but we're finding a niche for members of Parliament to interrogate and analyze the pathways that could make domestication a reality, because these hinge on very important issues of the people that we represent. I will share. Okay, Chair, I was handing over to you to see if there's anything that members would like to see clarity or we proceed.
Let's proceed, SJ.
Okay.
I don't see any hand from the members.
Okay, so I chose a few that I thought will be of interest to the committee, which I believe that it's an old song that has been sung around regional integration, the issue of visa exemptions among SADC member states. We know that this issue also hinges on the free trade area, the movement of people and goods, but this, as you can see, this was something that was, this is a protocol on facilitation of movement of persons is from 2005. And this was part of the regional integration agenda. Member states have not been able to fully take advantage of their commitment in this regard. What we are seeing, and this is what was reported by the executive secretary, they continue to monitor progress on the conclusion of visa exemption among member states. And the progress is reflected, which I'm sharing with you now. You will not see much of it. This progress here, for instance, when you look at a member states, let me look at the member states of members who are here. When you look at Angola is here, but they're not here, but you find that DRC, Eswatini, Lesotho, Malawi, Tanzania still require visas to enter Angola. When you look at Botswana, DRC and Madagascar still require visas to enter Botswana. I will now move to Eswatini. Eswatini is doing well, it's only DRC, but I think they resolved this at this current summit, that they should not need visas. But for instance, because Botswana is here, for Botswana to go to the DRC, they need visas. Angola needs visas, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, Seychelles, South Africa, Eswatini, Tanzania, and Zambia. So Eswatini, I've spoken about Eswatini. I'll speak the other countries and go to the countries that are here. For Seychelles, they don't require, nobody requires a visa to enter Seychelles. So that is a country that has done very well, which is in the room. And then for Tanzania, Angola, DRC, and the Comoros need a visa to enter Tanzania. For Malawi, Angola, DRC, and the Comoros require visas. I'll stop there, Chair. I'm just teasing issues that can maybe whet your appetite for engagement and recommendations. There's nobody from South Africa here, but South Africa, DRC, and the Comoros need visa.
But the rest is just come.
You just come. May I proceed, Chair? Yes. So now I'll move on to another one, which is also linked to our model law on gender-based violence. As indicated, Council and Summit really looked at the issue of GBV, and they approved the SADC gender-based violence scorecard, which we discussed earlier on. But also of interest is to work with the ministries, because they have a SADC handbook to promote effective GBV prevention initiatives. And this was developed to support member states in implementing measures to address the root cause of gender-based violence. So I'm sharing this because as opposed to us developing new instruments, we must realize that we have a resource in our countries, which we must engage with ministries to be able to share with us. The other issue, Council also at the end concluded and invited that 15 member states, Angola, Botswana, Comoros, DRC, Eswatini, Madagascar, Malawi, Mauritius, Mozambique, Namibia, Seychelles, South Africa, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, they submitted data. They noted that they submitted data on GBV because as part of monitoring, there's data that is required from our countries. So as part of oversight, it would be interesting and important for honorable members to ask their member states to give them this data to assist them in asking the right questions. But it was also noted that the submitted data really still has challenges. The data is not disaggregated by sex and age, and the quality varies because of the completeness of the data that has been given. I think my colleagues from Parliament will also help us how to solve this one. What is the entry points for Parliament? when this data is out there, when these instruments have been passed by our own governments, can we not engage at national level and see how you could assist in this regard? Now, they also shared to say this is not just an issue that we're raising, there's concern. When you look at the grand total of reported GBV cases in SADC in 2022, we are talking about for male, 87,210, for female, 284,776. So we cannot say we have a model law, we can't say we have policies and therefore we have done our work when these things are happening. The question that Honorable Shelley asked earlier, will the law prevent and stop this? I think it's a critical question, but it also enjoins us to look at remedies, develop programs and intensify. I know implementation is not, the responsibility of parliaments, but I believe through collaboration and oversight at national level, these are questions that you can take interest in and begin to, even if it means bringing the lived reality of a person you represent to parliament to educate. Because, for instance, Loveness cannot enter any parliament and give the story, but it is you, members of parliament, who can bring live. And I always like, if you watch some presidents around the world, they always talk about, I met James, and they give a story of a sobbing story about an individual in the community. And they say, this cannot continue to happen in our democracy. Or while I'm the president, I would not want to see this happening. So this is giving a voice in replacing Loveness's voice, who's not a member of parliament and cannot enter the halls of parliament. The list goes on here. This is rape data that was reported. The numbers are still horrific per country, but here it's what was submitted per country, but you see all of them are high. There's nothing below, the only Mauritius is below 37, but others are going into hundreds and thousands. So we have a problem of GBV. Now, when you look at some of these issues around, for instance, let me move on to, they also evaluated regional, continental, and international legal instruments. And this is what motivated us to bring this to your attention. You will find, for instance, that the tripartite free trade area negotiations are ongoing, and there are so many changes that are continuing to happen, which we should be paying attention to as members of parliament. You'll recall that we had a plenary assembly session where we were looking at these issues and we made resolutions. And I think we were quite on time, because when the AFCFTA commenced on the 1st of January, in December of the same year, we held a theme on the same. And one will then ask this committee, have you requested for reports? And have we then discussed what then has happened? Because that is the role of this committee. We should summon reports and be able to say what has been effective, what is required for an effective trade, and what has been effective. And you will note there that we still require, for the FTA agreement to be effective, we still need all the 54 African Union member states to sign. But the number of ratification, we're told that it has increased to at least 46 to now. There are 11 countries that are yet to join the FCFTA family. And amongst them is Madagascar, a SADC member state. So we have to look at these issues and see how we also encourage each other. I believe this committee will not be taking the place of the plenary assembly of the executive committee, but the modalities that we use to talk to each other and encourage are different, because we are persuading through diplomacy the implementation, and where need be, we'll then surface the consent through data to the plenary assembly. I will not get into the other issues there, but I felt we must know I will share there are a lot of issues around the draft schedules, around the tariff lines, which are quite important. We have to also be looking at what has been approved or adopted, including the e-tariff books, the rules of origin manual, the origins declaration form, the certificate. We've been offering training for members of parliament with TRALAC. Some members don't attend, some attend, but TRALAC is committed and they've been given certificates to members of parliament. I don't know among our chairpersons if they've taken an opportunity for that. I don't know which members have attended, but these are offered and TRALAC is offering it to members of parliament. They actually go to the detail. They go through the agreement. They show you how you should interpret it. They also assist you in terms of what you should know that is happening currently. So if this is a training that, and some, because the uptake was not good, they've not since come back, but they are open and they're ready. We've had plenary assemblies where, I don't know if you remember a lady called Trudy Hazenbeck from TRALAC, who has really been at the forefront. They've coined a module just for us, SADC PF, to appreciate these issues for you to move them. So I would like to encourage that we bring it back and maybe we can organize better how we're offering it. I think they're also happy to train each parliament if the regional level process is quite taxing. But because we don't have resources, they were doing it through Zoom and they're offering certificates. I have certificates from them and I believe other members do have. I could show you the list, but a lot of members do have certificates in this regard. And I'm just flagging to say this is an important area. We've spoken about the transformation of the SADC PF. I was just picking areas that I think may be relevant to ourselves. So, honorable members, I think just as a teaser, we're just sharing because I'm not from the SADC Secretariat. I don't want to get into a situation where I represent that data wrongly. But in terms of where conclusions were made, I have shared that these were the highlights. We then had to make our own analysis in order to make this relevant. And this is the value of us being allowed to attend the SADC Summit and support the implementation capacity. One would look forward. The public hearings that we're having from October are based on these protocols. So we are going to, as you know, we took a resolution that we have 2 plenary assemblies. The first part of the year, we can have physical meetings or committee sessions. The second part is public hearings. And this time around, we really want to open it up so perfectly, use our ICTs, request Parliament to help us advertise so that the citizens of SADC can come and represent their views. So these themes that we're going to suggest to you as chairpersons are going to assist us catalyze some of these processes at the regional level. This is what the SADC PF believes some of these activities can link to this particular committee. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam SJ. And once again, let me thank you for a well-presented status and also quite a few teasers that are teasing our brains to be prepared. Honorable members, is there any interventions from the floor? I see a hand from Tanzania, the Vice Chairperson. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, for giving me the chance. And please allow me to thank Madam SG for the well-presented issue on the protocols. And previously, she introduced that we should also contact UNFP. And now she also introduced that we should, as well as members, maybe contact TRALAC. I think these are very important areas whereby we need guidance as members to attend such causes or to look for assistance from those areas. I started with that because I see there's a lot of, we require or we need training from such organizations who are ready to train us individually or maybe our parliaments, if I'm not mistaken. Having said that, I'm just going to request a bit of elaboration on things which were already discussed earlier, and they've been taken in a piecemeal. And a very crucial one is the one of visa. I'm sure that reached the level of executive, but then as well explained that we cannot force it. Still think we should now come to a point whereby we do our assignment well as an oversight committee to see that all the countries get free, do not require visa to travel within themselves as a region. Maybe I should give an example of East Africa, EALA. East Africa region. We don't require visa to go to Kenya or Uganda or for the other regions to come to us. Now, SADC is a bigger area, a bigger region compared to that. But now we are behind in becoming a parliament, and we're also behind in removing the visa part of it. I don't know which leaf we should borrow, but I think we require something. Something is not right somewhere. Either it's me who don't understand so much, but the way you have explained it and you have said it so well that we should keep on lobbying. Now my question is, whom are we lobbying to? To the executives? Or whom are we requesting the permission? That's requiring elaboration. I don't know how to put it better, but I think your committee, Honorable Chair, should see how to present it further and request, if not insist, that we should all be free of visa. If I'm wrong, please, I'm ready to be corrected. But it is high time. Let us start from home. It's so peaceful when you come to South Africa and no visa. And it is written there. Now, once you mentioned no visa to Seychelles, I want to go to Seychelles with my chair tomorrow. As well, you are free to come to us, aren't you? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chairperson. I see a hand from Botswana. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. A thought-provoking presentation, SG. One could actually even develop a very interesting academic paper out of it. But my reaction to all of it is that, of course, I think the analysis is spot on. When you look at Botswana, for instance, we have a lot of protocols and international treaties that we have not ratified. Some we've ratified, but we have not domesticated. Some we have domesticated, but we are not implementing. If for instance you take the SADC protocol on gender and development, it took a while before Botswana could ratify. But of course, the argument was always that we are fine, we are doing well, which was true, except in the political cycle. When you look at the councillors, local councils and parliament, we are not doing really well when it comes to women representation. I think we have about 10% now. Yeah, women representation in our parliament. I'm not sure about local government, but the numbers are very low. So, and of course, the other argument, and here is interesting because trade unions, they put a lot of pressure on ILO conventions. They will always be challenging government, to ratify. But one aspect which I think for us as MPs, we also need to look at is our role really when it comes to ratification of these international instruments and domestication. Because in the memorandum of the bill on, was it reenactment or amendment of the Rome Statute? Was it reenactment or yes, I think it was just recently we had to reenact the Rome Statute, at domestication. So in the preamble, in the memorandum, something caught my eye, and when I debated, I highlighted on the issue. The minister was saying, he was putting more emphasis on that ratification of international instruments was the prerogative of the executive. There was that, there was that line. And I in my opening when I debated, I said it's something that we really should reflect on in terms of that we don't just reduce the role of MPs to domestication when we have to enact a law and then that they have to debate the law. When the decision to domesticate is already, or to ratify has already been taken. In other jurisdictions, I think South Africa is a case in point. Again, I'm amenable to correction on this one. I think there's a role that Parliament actually plays when it comes to not just at the level of domestication, but at the level of decision to ratify an international treaty. So I think again it's something that we really need to reflect on as members of Parliament. Parliaments are a barometer of public opinion. We represent the people, and I think that it cannot be the prerogative of the executive to decide on whether it ratifies a SADC protocol on gender and development. When our women in our constituencies are saying we need as much international instruments that can protect us as much as possible. So if you don't have a platform to say yes or no, or that only being reduced to when it's time for domestication. So yeah, I thought I should highlight. And as I was saying, SG, that I think the analysis are spot on, because you may find that sometimes would have subscribed to some of the, either we are bound by some bilateral agreements or even some other multilateral agreements, and sometimes you find that they are not in sync with the regional instruments. I think it's rather spot on. We've been catching a lot of fire as a country recently about an issue which I don't think our government is doing enough to address. But that is not my main worry. But you'd recall that some countries have a bilateral agreement with the US not to hand their citizens to the ICC or any court for that matter, for war crimes and related crimes, suspicions. But the irony of it is that some of these countries are actually ready to hand fellow Africans to the ICC if they are wanted. So now this brings me to the point that I wanted to mention, that lately I've seen some South African politicians talking a lot about that Botswana has an American base, and that they could be attacked from that base by the US, and I don't know where they get these things from. But it goes to that point where we sort of sometimes don't engage enough on these issues. Just during my debate, in trying to highlight that we are lagging behind with some of these things, there has been resistance. I've mentioned it on amending the law to domesticate the SADC model law on the eradication of child marriage and protecting children already in marriages. What I also see is that there is also a resistance when it comes to the SADC PF model law in elections in terms of its domestication. Key aspects of it, actually. And as I've said, it took time to ratify the gender protocol on the protocol on gender in development. So, yeah, I think, as I said, SG, it's thought-provoking. It also calls on us to really see how we move forward, but most importantly, the role of members of parliament in providing effective oversight when it comes to international relations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Seychelles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A small observation when SGU were presenting the data. There were so many countries with no data. I was wondering, is it because, especially when it comes to disaggregated data, even back home, when we want to get statistics for our parliamentary work, sometimes it is very difficult to get disaggregated data. My question is it because there's no guideline in submitting data, or the methodology of submitting that or collecting data needs to be reviewed if we want especially to analyze the situation of gender-based violence, which data is very important for us to analyze the situation on the ground? Would you say that the methodology of collecting data that needs to be reviewed? Or I don't know. Because back home, the data is being collected, especially in gender-based violence, by the Gender Secretariat. You know, I don't know if we have to sensitize them in the methodology of collecting data. I submit.
Thank you very much, Honorable. And I give the floor to the Secretary General.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you, honorable members, for embracing the presentation. Let me start with the last one, because I think it's easy. I have difficulty where we have government machinery, we have bureaucrats, we have systems that we've put in place, and we accept that they can say that we cannot work. We are not short of capacity to review any formation of data collection or not. So I find it difficult to discuss it and accept that there could be no room for feedback in terms of regularizing and doing that which we've agreed to get it. Because as we know in our work, we are instructed and you have to make it work. If there's a problem, you come back and seek guidance, and you're guided accordingly. I would not speak for SADC Secretary, but I believe that the mechanisms at country level, where we set up and say the police will report on the number of cases. Let's just not go to GBV. When I used to be with the Minister of Health, the minister would insist, I want to know how many children are having diarrhea, because some of these things are preventable. And it was given, there was data collected. We have mechanisms where we knew how to collect the number of deaths, the number of X, and the police, and that is how you come up with a budget, by the way, to be able to know what you're responding to. So if indeed member states, for instance, or certain individuals find that the data collection form is cumbersome or they need a methodology, I believe the doors are open. In fact, the approval process that I've seen at the SADC circuit is controlled by member states. The shaping is controlled by permanent secretaries, the technical people. So I don't know how to answer this one about the methodology, because if we commit to say we want to know the number of grains, maize that you find that they have no problem in telling you how many tons are coming from here to here. But there are issues where we always have to accept that there's need for improvement. And that is why I'm saying I'm not competent to answer that question. Maybe it's a matter where chairpersons can take it to the national level to find out where there's no need to, where there is a gap and how that can be done. If it's a budgetary issue, I'm sure that's where Parliament will come in. But I think maybe consultations, visits to the relevant ministry, that's part of the oversight, maybe oversight to, and that is why you recall in your last meeting, we agreed to develop a model law on prison oversight, simply because it was the same issue. There's no data, we don't know where this is coming from, but I think, I'm not sure, Honorable. The answer is that I don't know. Simply is that I don't know, but I don't believe. That's the second part of my question. I think we can all make it happen somehow, because femicide is reported on every front page of our newspaper. How much data do we need? We hear of children that are raped, children that are falling pregnant. We just had this morning, 8-year-olds are falling pregnant. Sometimes we should not seek evidence in the face of the obvious. If we have to take decisions, we must, because it's unacceptable, or just simply because we have signed and agreed to this, to the African Charter, let me say. We have a vision to the Africa we want. We have slogans. We are not rule takers, we are rule makers. So Africa, in most of their visions, have a principle where love, security, and peace are central to most of the visions in the SADC region. So I don't know, Honorable, in that regard. So I would have to also exercise my mind and maybe ask some people. But I think you are the best placed to check why the data is not arriving, because you can then help resolve it at country level, because these are member states reporting. The other issue is that I cannot agree more with what Honorable Korapet has said. I think there needs to be commitment. International law should be implemented scrupulously. That is why it can guide. Otherwise, there'll be no peace in the world. We also know that we are stuck. For instance, when you look at the WTO agreements, we always say, there's a provision where we can take advantage of these exceptions and get medicines in this way and not in that way. But we are bound by those multilateral agreements. And therefore, sometimes it's not because Parliament or governments don't know what to do, but it is because they're respecting the cooperation. So there's complexity. That is why I didn't want to get into it, but I believe tomorrow, the legal officers are listening. They'll pick some of the examples where there's complexity to share case studies. And I don't want to give many examples because there's a lot that is happening where we're even trampling onto, there's a backsliding in democracy where agreements are now being looked at from self-interest. But I don't want to start talking and not doing you justice by appearing to be interfering with domestic processes, because that is not my role. Mine is to build capacity and allow the processes to be taken by members of Parliament. So, Chair, I just wanted to say the last training was done in October 2022 on the trade. So if we want another training, we can do that. And just to share that, they share, the agenda was quite broad and, they share quite a lot. And they give you ideas around where you should go. You should understand the architecture of the Africa Free Trade Area. They also assist you to understand what are the agreements established in this agreement. So you may find that you then understand, oh, there's a protocol on trades and goods. There's a protocol on trade services. There's a protocol on rules and procedures on the settlement of disputes. And then they also shared with us the documents, the annexes that we can look at. And they tell you the different phases, the issues of women, Honorable Esperon. There's a protocol on women and youth and in trade. There's also a protocol on digital trade. And this is a matter that we want to take forward into the next, the ICT, the intelligence, the artificial intelligence. It's moving too fast. And if you follow the debate, there are countries that are moving to say, let's stop these guys. We've gone too far. I don't think we even know how to undo it. So these are issues that there's a phase 3 to this process. It goes on and on. And it shows you the structures. They were teaching us about the structures that are involved in this process so that you know where to look at. So it would be good if this committee can basically, as chairpersons, to interest your committees. If you just want them to come and talk about the interest of women in trade, they can assist you and how to safeguard their participation. Honorable Kurapeti from the Hardcore Trade Committee, the issue of food and goods and agriculture, industrialization is a matter that is high on the priority of our governments. The value chain, we can't keep saying we need to improve, but we're not talking about the locomotive around the value chain. How do we empower the issue of property rights, intellectual property rights that we're talking about, digital trade and all those issues. So these are matters that are really important for the SADC PF. And we've talked a lot about some countries having lithium, which is now becoming a curse because it's wanted and it's putting us on the fence. We're all using cell phones, among others. So, Chair, I just needed to share that. And it is a rich program. And at the end of the day, you also get a certification in that regard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable SG. I think maybe just to ask the members, I think, do we have any other interventions on our members?
On the visas, I know I get the feeling that I think we have made strides as the region in terms of the visas. I think it's here and there where we need to engage each other in terms of, you'll find that say in Botswana will be requiring visa from a few countries. I think we've moved even further. Botswana recently has gotten into an agreement, bilateral agreement with Namibia to just use IDs to cross the border. Well, the merits and demerits can be debated, but that's the agreement now. And then it will come in handy for those who live along the borders and have relatives that side and this side. So the crossing will not need the passport to be stamped. But I really want to see how we are doing as a continent in terms of the visas, because really I think we should be moving towards really a visa-free continent. But as I think we've moved really forward as a region. I think so.
And let me just say, that is the conclusion of council. That is what I said, that they are noting that there's been a lot of progress, and that I think in their wisdom, you can do away with those limitations and we can quickly move on, because it's very few. That is why they've reduced it to bilateral agreements now, so that it's faster. So they are just monitoring in order to persuade as part of reporting all the time. But they have concluded that they have moved in that area. And of course, the issue of Botswana was quite celebrated. It is something that has allowed free movement across. When you visit, you can use your ID. And it's one of the commitment towards cooperation. You can exemplify it if, for instance, it becomes complex to get passports and other, you note that to get a passport, you pay. And if you want to show commitment to the people and understand the realities, there isn't even anything difficult, like Botswana then concluded that let's use the ID. because it is a must. You get an ID at a certain age. But there are other issues in terms of children who don't have IDs and other things. But I think it's a milestone in that regard. So they did note that they have made progress. So I think that must come out clearly that they were just also acknowledging.
Special request.
Yes, Madam Vice Chair, you have the floor.
Honorable Chair, I'm requesting SG to assist me. Now the thing when it came up, does it mean that all the countries agreed to it? So they sent, that is ratification, it, correct me. And then they did not, only few domesticated it, is it versus or against it, or within few countries? None of those countries are fighting. Maybe Tanzania is not fighting with Botswana. None of them are fighting. If South Africa of all the countries could agree and without visa to many of the rest of the countries, why not the rest? That's where I'm getting a problem. I mean, will you please assist me?
Thank you very much.
I mean,
No, I'll leave it to the SG to elaborate.
do you use visa to come to Malawi?
No, you didn't, but we used in DRC. I'm sure everyone who participated used visa in DRC.
If DRC tulitumia visa.
Yes,
Did we?
yes. I give you the floor, Madam SG.
Chair, I will give this one to the legal counsel because there are steps. And I wanted them to clarify those steps tomorrow, but maybe before. Yeah, but yeah, because it will be easy when they give you an example to say you start here and move here and move here. Sometimes people just take 2 steps. Let's say we're going to that exit door and you are given steps from that wall to there. You find that others take 1 step, others 2 steps. Others remain at 1 step. Others then move to the 3rd step, and some stand at the door waiting for others to join them before it happens. But there are others like Seychelles, Namibia, they'll talk about it depending on the system. Some are, they call them monist, some are dualist. There are those, once they have agreed, it becomes automatic. It becomes domestic law. So you find that Seychelles doesn't waste time, they just go to accession. They're what do you call it, whatever that word is. And then they have no stories to play, they are committed. But you find that sometimes you want your child to get married, first come and ask, come and knock. I don't know if you have it in your culture, come and knock. So you go and knock first, you go back. You come back, now you have to pay the cows. Then you come back. Sometimes there are those who can't pay those cows, they go for good. So I want them to explain it. I don't want to confuse the legal terms, but maybe to conclude this, Honorable Chair, let me say that at the end of the day for this committee, the lessons to learn is that we need to harmonize the need for harmonization of international law vis-a-vis the importance of our model law. Because international law today takes multiple facets. If gender is addressed, there are different instruments which exist at the international level and at the regional level, including but not limited to the UN Declaration, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. We have CEDAW, the African Charter on Human People's Rights, the Maputo Protocol, the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development, to cite a few. So our model law does not leave these things out. Our model law is based on the same. It is amplifying and just putting together so that we persuade our countries to look how it can look like if the gold standard was agreed to by all. So this is why we develop a model law. But we also note that due to competing international interests and parallel or duplicative reporting to treaty-based bodies, member states may decide that they will stick to only one treaty and ignore all the others, which is not appropriate for regional integration. There's a protocol on employment. I didn't share it with you. And I had made an analysis. Some countries are not signing for various reasons, which I will not get because it was not conclusive. But if all of us agree that unemployment is the issue in the region, for instance, can we not cooperate around that? Do you say, for instance, for me, I've lost on gender-based violence. There's no need for me. We are doing very well, just to cite an example. And this happened when we developed the GBV model. There were countries that were saying, but what are you trying to do? We have laws on GBV. When child marriage came, they said, we have laws on child marriage, among others. But I think we cannot be selective. Commitment is complete. It is not selective. You don't take this one that will catch Madam SG, and then you leave the other one that will release Honorable Esperon. Those exceptions, loopholes that we create in our laws, I think we have to own up to that. So I think we must accept that this is where our model laws come into play. This is where our model laws are normative frameworks, which are contextualized to the region and amalgamates provisions and best practices from other treaties and conventions. I often hear people saying, why are we developing this model law? You want to change, you are not a parliament, you are going to change our laws, you have no right, it's soft law, what is the point? I wanted this to really be understood, honorable members. We are not coming up with anything that has already not been agreed to. Secondly, our model laws brings together everything that that is good, which is the best practice. And it pulls together all the ones that, whether it is CEDAW, the UN Declaration, the African Charter, it pulls all that together and gives it life in a single instrument. So honorable members, as I end this committee, may wish to reflect on the need for model laws to be domesticated, because we need to catalyze the parallel domestication of protocols and other related instruments. Otherwise, we'll not succeed. Otherwise, then the question is relevant. What is the value of the model laws? And my wish and hope, even beyond this job, if I can see this being catalyzed, where members can at least attempt, because it is not about, and when I report often to donors, I say to them, no, don't ask me where is the law. Ask me whether there was quality in debate. Ask me whether there was an attempt. Ask me whether there was a question or a motion was tabled. Because in governance processes, this is what, because the lawmaking rests somewhere. So I think if your efforts, if your steps can be counted, if your footprints can remain in the sand, you'll not regret your political life. And this is where I end, Honorable Chair, and this is my plea. That will also make my tenure successful, if at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam SG. Honorable members, I think we have come to the end of the day today. So we shall break for tomorrow. And tomorrow we shall start at 9. So we're hoping that we start at 9 sharp so that we finish also early, so that we can have some free time in the afternoon, so that we don't finish late in the afternoon. So at least if we can be on time at 9. So I would adjourn the house to 9 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable.
I think, Chair, we may wish to recognize the resource person from Angola Parliament. He's sitting there. Maybe he can introduce himself to the honorable members.
All right. Thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't recognize.
No, we did. Yeah, he came in earlier, but yeah, thank you.
All right. Please, you may introduce yourself.
Do we have a translation, interpretation? SG. Is there? Okay, fine.
You don't speak English?
I do.
For introduction.
Just for the introduction, you can speak English, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to give value to my colleagues, the interpreters. But anyway, my name is Mario Quinta, and I'm the advisor to the clerk of the National Assembly So I am going to talk tomorrow on the topic that has been already introduced by Madam SG. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mario, and welcome. We hope to hearing from you tomorrow. Thank you very much, honorable members, and SG, through you, we can conclude. Thank you.